Back in the day, if you were to ask me what my favorite day of the week was, it would have been difficult to choose between Taco Tuesday, Thirsty Thursday, or Wasted Wednesday. As a matter of fact, I don't remember ever saying no to these invitations coming my way. Even during finals week for all-nighters spent cramming in the library, you could count me in. I had completed 3 years of undergrad at UC Irvine, when just like that, everything changed. Life went from receiving advice on what to pack for the senior year beach house in Newport Beach to receiving thoughts and prayer chains. I was on my way home after spending a night out at the fair with my friends when I was hit head on by a drunk driver, going the wrong way on the freeway. My lifestyle went from all in to a 15% chance of survival. 1-5 in the blink of an eye. After 30 days in a coma, 8 surgeries, and 1 knee replacement later, I regained control of what percentage I was going to live my life. The 3 months I spent in the hospital, I remember thinking, if I can just make it out of here and go back to school, I'll be okay. I was dealing with the blood draws throughout the night and vomiting at all hours of the day due to side effects of the medicine. I could somehow even fathom the 10 seconds I went breathless as the nurse cleaned my trach. And there was one nurse in particular that I'll never forget. It was late in October when Nurse Jane asked what I really wanted, and I told her, I'm hoping I can be back to school in January and still graduate this year. And I'll never forget her words. She said, "Oh, honey, I wouldn't be so ambitious if I were you." But she was so wrong. She may have been looking at a fragile 120-pound young girl, but she didn't see the warrior within me. The power of my hope brought the future into that present moment. It wasn't wishful thinking for me. I decided then that this struggle would only be a part of my journey. What I also didn't know was that it was going to be one of the toughest and most trying journeys of my life. My first day of physical therapy started with 2 nurses lifting me into a chair and just sitting. Sitting in a chair for 30 minutes to work on expanding my lungs was physical therapy. I cried 10 minutes in. How did I get here? A few weeks before that, I was on top of the world. I was living my best life. I had the best of friends, and everything just seemed so perfect. I was about to finish school and start a new chapter. How could everything just be pulled from under me so quickly? Worse, how could my life be upside down because of someone else's bad decision? An action we've been told time and time again not to take. Do not get behind the wheel when you've been drinking. I spent weeks learning how to stand, how to reuse my vocal cords, how to swallow, and I was still confined to a wheelchair. One day, after I had been transferred into a rehabilitation center, a nurse came in the door and asked if I wanted to go outside. I hadn't seen the light of day in 2 months, so I didn't even care that it was a cold Wednesday in November. So, 2 nurses pivoted me into a wheelchair and handed me off to my dad. You guys should have seen the excitement on his face when we were in the elevator. His contagious smile from ear to ear that overpowered his face and shrunk his hazel eyes, and his habit of caressing my chin like I was still his 5-year-old baby. I think he was more excited than I was, but my dad was always a person to remind me to see the good in everything, so I was grateful to share that moment with him. As we walked through the automatic doors, I felt the chilly breeze caress my face. My dad pushed me forward, and I could hear the swish of the cascading waterfall. And for the first time in 3 months, there was no pain, no sadness, no anger. Just a breath of fresh air. There was a woman in scrubs leaning against the wall behind us, and she said, "First time at the healing garden?" And then it hit me. I had spent the past few weeks of my life trying to get back to pre-accident Tanya, but at that very moment, I couldn't remember the last time I had sat outside to enjoy the sun and just get some fresh air. I couldn't remember a time in my life where I felt happier. I guess sometimes all we need is a healing garden. Because who would have thought that in the midst of this battle to physically live again, that I would find happiness within the peace and the simplicity of the sun and the outdoors, listening to the burbles of a man-made waterfall. I was so eager to get back to the fast, adventurous, and busy life I enjoyed so much, I took for granted the small things, the small details that make the bigger picture beautiful. I spent countless hours in that healing garden until I healed just enough to make it back home. And then a grim reality set in. I watched my friends go through commencement ceremony from the not so comforting comfort of my couch. My only graduation that year was from a wheelchair to a walker to a slow limp. I didn't recognize it at the time, but the breakthrough was just beginning because I did what I was determined to do. In August of that year, I made it back onto campus. But campus life was nothing like I remembered it. Not only were all of my friends gone, I couldn't even walk through campus without stopping halfway to give my legs a break. But these same achy legs walked the commencement ceremony in June. And I wasted no time to jump into the real world. I landed my first big girl job at a major insurance company, and from the outside looking in, I had overcome. The crippling reality, though, was from the inside looking out, I hadn't. The grief of my physical and psychological loss was overwhelming, and it was spilling into all aspects of my life. My relationship was rocky, my attitude was negative, and nothing felt normal. Despite so many people around me recommending I see a therapist, I had never really been the type to open up, so I started seeking out ways to turn my life around. I had done it once with only a 15% chance, so what was stopping me now? So I turned to reading. I occupied my mind and filled my thoughts with positivity and the desire to control the quality of my life, and it seemed to be working. I saw my relationship improving, my job was thriving. Things seemed to be slowly going back to normal, or to this new normal that my life had become. The frustration never seemed to fully subside though, because physically there were limitations, and even though the scars were healed, they were constant reminders of the pain and the unfairness of life. As I began to embrace my scars as proof that I was a warrior that had won the battle, another battle was beginning. It was a Monday morning and I was rushing per usual because I was already late. My mom and dad were at their usual places at the dining table, drinking coffee and eating pan dulce, when I said goodbye and I ran out the door with one arm in my jacket and a mild, warm coffee in the other. Around 12:30, I got a call from my mom saying my dad wasn't feeling well and they were on their way to the doctor. So I left work and I met them at the hospital. My dad was admitted and the testing began to see what was going on. That night, I said goodnight to my dad and I promised I would be back early the next morning. By then, he was pretty heavily medicated though, so all I got was a mumbled goodnight. And that was the last time I ever spoke to him. He died 7 weeks later after a long fought battle against a flesh-eating bacteria that doctors said they had only read about in textbooks. And just like that, my life was upside down all over again. And this time, I had no one to push me into the healing garden. The pain was so heavy, it physically hurt to think about my dad no longer being here. It was like the meaning of life was lost. Not only was he the best at preparing coffee, and thanks to him I had the greatest sarcasm genes, but who was going to walk me down the aisle? My nieces and nephews always said my dad was the best grandpa in the world, yet my kids would never get to meet him or experience that. I just didn't understand. The pain was so deep and so rooted, I didn't even bother to read any books because I knew they wouldn't work. It took me 8 months to accept that I was depressed. See, all my life I had this image of what I thought depression looked like, but that wasn't me. I was still able to shower and I went to work and I still somewhat functioned. I just didn't feel like I had anything to look forward to. And one day, I saw the worry in my mom's eyes when she asked how I was doing. And I knew then that I had some accepting to do. I had spent too much time fighting myself and my feelings instead of fighting for myself. After years of thinking that I could handle anything that came my way with no assistance from others, I sought help. It took all the courage in me to ask for help, but I realized that no warrior wins a battle alone. And I don't know who thought of the idea of sitting in an uncomfortable room and just talking about your feelings, but it was quite effective. It took a lot of conscious effort and hard work, but I was slowly starting to cope with my dad's absence. I took responsibility in keeping his memory alive through my actions, and I knew he would only want the best for me, so I did exactly what he taught me to do: be courageous. Fast forward 2 years later, I'm a financial advisor at one of the most prestigious investment firms in the world. But see, none of this would have been possible if I didn't have the courage to imagine a life based on not what happened to me, but on how I responded to it. So many times I thought about quitting, but every time I imagined the life I wanted, I became a little bit more courageous. I started my career so hungry for success. I am a woman in a male-dominated arena. I am young and I am Hispanic. The double takes I get when I walk into a room are something I've learned to embrace because they don't know the warrior within me. Failure is not an option for me. Through my knowledge and my platform, now I can empower others to have the courage to imagine a life with enough financial resources and guidance to pursue and achieve their goals. My mission may be large, but my passion is larger. And at this point in my life, I know that the saying of life can throw you curveballs sometimes is super inaccurate. Life will throw you curveballs. And the sooner you can begin to understand that your struggles are what make you brave and what make you resilient, the better you can appreciate your life. I have witnessed firsthand how short life can be and how quickly everything can be taken from us. That's why I live a life where I find joy in little things like sitting outside under the sun or coffee in the mornings with my mom. I even enjoy the rain because I know without it, nothing grows. We don't always see it initially, but from the unexpected comes the unbelievable. So every day, I'm all in. Every day, I'm a warrior within.